Hey, everybody. Nice. Thank you. As tech people, we all know how to use technology, right? Just kidding. So I'm Ian Cairns. Like Ben said, run a company up in Boulder called FreePlay. We spend all of our days helping people build products with generative AI. I've been at it for a couple years now and have gotten to see a lot of really cool stuff being built around the world. And then we also run this Boulder AI Builders Meetup that's now becoming the Denver and Boulder AI Builders Meetup. For people that have been to that, tonight there's going to be a few hundred people in this room if you want to come back. So that's a little bit about what I bring to the room. I'm the panelist, so I'm not going to talk a lot about me, but just kind of some context. And then the folks up here all have a lot of expertise, mostly more than me. And I'm excited for you to all hear from them. We want to make this a discussion. But before we kind of jump into the content, we just want to do some quick intros, hear who these people are. And I will ask us, I guess, to just go down the list. Let's start with Carrie. And I would love for you to just give us a minute. You can always do your professional intro, but why are you on this stage? What perspective do you bring to this topic? And a minute or so.
Great. So my name is Carrie Law. I'm currently studying AI ethics at the University of Cambridge. I just turned in my thesis this last weekend, so I'm a little bit tired. Thank you so much. Big push. So what I kind of study there, at least focus on, is kind of public value and how AI can deliver public value. A lot of my research is mainly focused around governance, although I do dabble in some thought experiments around the planetary costs of AI and things like anthropomorphism, which is a really fun word to say, of AI as well. Prior to Cambridge, I was with the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. I was with their strategy team heading kind of how our countries of operations could take advantage of the future of work and digital government, kind of getting all of them ready for the wave to come. So that's why I'm on this stage. I'm not as technical as the rest of my panelists, but hopefully I will provide an interesting perspective.
We need people outside of tech speaking into this conversation. Awesome. Thanks, Carrie. Kyle.
Thank you. I'm Kyle Nesbitt. I'm a Google software engineer. I've been at Google for over 16 years. First 8 years, I was working on high-performance distributed systems. Last 8 years, I've been doing all kinds of things related to ML, which we now call AI. From ads measurement, spent a little time in venture capital with AI-focused fund there. And most recently, I am working in Google Cloud on Google's data analytics and business intelligence projects. Why am I here? Well, I think he invited me to be the contrarian and keep the conversation interesting. But I have a ton of technical experience, hands-on experience with models, and I'm deeply passionate about machine learning and the future of machine learning.
Hello? Okay, there we go.
Got it.
My name is Kirsten Suddeth. I'm a general partner at Next Frontier Capital. So I bring the investor perspective to the stage. Our firm invests in B2B technology companies broadly. So previously we were investing in machine learning. Now we're investing in AI with this fun new rebrand we're all having. We focus on companies that are based in the Rocky Mountains, seed stage typically, average check size is 2 to 3 million, lead investors. And so we have led a number of investments in this space over the years, seen the evolution. So I can kind of talk about what's interesting from a VC perspective, what we kind of look for, and then that kind of thing. My background prior to being an investor is on the operating side. Finance and operations are kind of my core functions across a very wide different industries, including clean tech, local food, and technology.
Awesome. My name is Steve Walczak. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a Denver-based company called Liminal. Liminal helps regulated industries securely deploy and leverage generative AI across all of the different use cases and vectors in which you can engage with generative AI. The reason I'm here, Ian asked me to fill in last minute, which I thought was one reason. But no, the reason I'm here actually is we see how companies are using Gen AI today, and particularly a swath of companies that they're not technology companies. That is a vastly different consumption type than technology providers. They have a much more advanced view on how AI is being leveraged in their companies, and a lot of companies will just kind of kick off with the stat here. 50% of America still hasn't even heard of OpenAI. Yeah. A couple of you went, wow, I know. We're in a bubble right now, right? We're all tech people here. Not all of us, but a lot of us are tech people. And so it's wild to even think about the fact that some people are still getting their minds blown by GPT 3.5. And that the model's been deprecated, but it's like, whoa, no, this thing just wrote me my PRD. Like, this is incredible. That still happens today. And so I think why am I here is I get to bring a little bit of grounded realism into how the non-tech companies are actually taking this technology forward.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's actually a good transition to how I wanted to organize the conversation. I asked all these folks for topics that they would want to discuss with their peers and with the group. So just to organize it a bit, we're going to break it up into 3 areas. I'm giving my panelists a little bit of a heads up too. I want to talk about what does generative AI mean in life for people, for businesses today? First section. We'll spend most of the time probably, or the majority, the big section will be, let's talk about it. What's it mean in tech? If you're building companies, building products, investing in this space. And then I want to end, especially with Carrie on stage, but I think, everybody too. I'm going to make Carrie and Kyle the yin and the yang on this conversation. Kyle made all this stuff happen, and Carrie's trying to figure out what to do about it now. But what's AI, the state of generative AI mean for us in the world, bigger picture, public good, societal impacts, those sorts of things. And so I think, Stephen, you're on a good topic. Maybe you want to stay on it for a minute, but I would love to kind of hear your perspectives. We're almost 2 years into this since the ChatGPT bubble burst. For normal people or for day-to-day life, what is your take on the AI hype cycle? To what degree is this real? Is this not real? What do you feel the impact really is? And if you've got an example or two, it'd be awesome to hear. If you're not just working at Google or Liminal building these kinds of products all day long, what's this mean to people?
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think I'll take a couple different tacks here. How many of you guys use ChatGPT every single day? I mean, really, truly every single day. So it's a good amount of the room here. How many of you guys don't really use it often but have tried it? Okay, it's still a fair number of people. We are at Denver Startup Week, which is typically meaning we're going to have an overabundance of tech people in the audience here. I can tell you very real that there are use cases right now that are still leveraging the most simple form, or what we determine right now is the most simple form of generative AI. And that is simply asking a model to do something or create some form of content that are, and I said they're still mind-blowing. A lot of companies are still at that stage. It's really tough because there's so much happening in the market. We hear about a new model being developed every other week. We hear about a bunch of new ways to consume this, a bunch of new agents, a bunch of SLMs, and everyone's trying to make sense of what this means. You have small teams distributed in these very large companies who are trying to figure out, well, how do I ingest all of this and actually build something that delivers value? And then we had the last 4 months, the ROI discussion has now come up inside of enterprise. They're all asking the question of how do I measure the impact of this? Right? Well, we know empirically, everyone in their team, and almost all of you raise your hand and said, I use this technology every day. And I'm certain if I were to ask any one of you guys could talk through the different use cases that you developed, other than just writing a poem to your nephew for their birthday. I can give you a bunch right now.
A rap song, not a poem.
Yeah, a rap song for sure. And I think what's so fascinating to me is, doctors right now are saving 30 minutes a day using ChatGPT. Definitely not HIPAA compliant, but they're doing it anyways. And they're doing it in a way where they're saying, hey, I need to write a claims appeal to an insurance company on behalf of my patient. They spend 20 minutes a day writing those. That is really simple for a model to do. You can feed it an example right away, ask it to write something similar, give it a patient diagnosis, and it will do it for you in a heartbeat. That's 20 minutes a day that doctor is getting back just by using something that is impactful. Now, it's not the mind-blowing use case that we're all looking for. Oh my God, Strawberry just came out and it can do things like reasoning. Well, that's really cool, but the doctor just wants to save more time so that they can devote more time to their patients. And that is where we are for the majority of America today. We are living in the hey, we've just been able to scratch the surface on what this technology can do, but even scratching the surface is good enough for a lot of America. And there's a whole bunch of and a litany of other things that need to be considered, like data security, HIPAA privacy, all those things when it comes to that particular use case. But we are at the very beginning. And when it comes to I know I'm hogging a lot of time here, so I'll stop after this. But how many in the room have heard of the Gartner hype cycle? Right? A lot of you. Okay. So We start with you know, the peak of inflated expectations, and we just crested that with Generative. Everybody was like, this is going to change the world, and then all of a sudden we're like a year into it, and everyone's like, this ROI doesn't exist. Why is everybody investing money into this? And it's like, well, no. Like the doctor's just saving 20 minutes a day. That's the time devoted back to patients. You can quantify that time in terms of dollars. Like I can tell you right now what the ROI is for that doctor. But everyone's asking these big questions now because we're headed now towards the trough of disillusion. And that's where we had all of these expectations of where we thought this technology was going to be able to do. A bunch of people blew it up. And then a bunch of the same people said, no, it can't do those things. Where the rest of us are still like, well, dude, this is really cool what it can do over here still. I'm like, my mind is still blown daily by what happens with Gen AI. So I think it's, you know, we have to like think outside of the tech bubble for a moment. And it's hard to do because all of us are immersed in all of the latest and greatest coming out from all of these different companies that we're so interested and excited about. But if you're actually talking to people who are buying this stuff, it's a very different story from my perspective.
No, that's great. And I mean, you said a lot. I'm sure a bunch of us agree roughly. Like, what's your take on, you know, I'm looking at the three of you, but is the impact real? You know, what's your take on like 2 years into this? Are we getting out of it all that we were promised? Or if we are getting something out of it, what are we getting?
I'll take a stab. So AI hype, I feel like there are some potential pitfalls. There are also some really great things. So let's start with the really great things. So there's more attention on AI regulation, which I think is fantastic. Regulation's not going to save the day, but regulation is desperately needed. There are more open source models, more open source data available, which I think is good for everybody, especially not just the Western world, but for the developing world. I'll probably mention the developing world quite a lot in today's conversation because it's something that gets left out. Innovation and advancement, that's an obvious one. What things we need to really watch out for? I think there are a lot of AI experts and kind of people who just fake it in AI, which can be really dangerous when you're looking at some of the ethical implications of its deployment. So that's one thing that I think the AI hype has really heightened. I think the anthropomorphism, again, the best word, is also quite dangerous. If you look at let's say, how many of you have seen a new chatbot, released on whatever platform in the last 6 months? More than likely, if the chatbot has a name or a personality, it's a female. These technologies that are assistive technologies tend to be women. And then the technologies that are really powerful, let's say technology in the military, tend to be men. This is quite dangerous because it really embeds some of these stereotypes into these technologies that are going to last forever. Maybe not forever. Forever maybe in the sense of technology. But it's really dangerous, these biases that we are embedding into these technologies that people just use without asking questions. And then also there's just the overuse of the word AI. Let's be honest, guys. AI, we use AI very little. It's mostly machine learning. It's mostly deep learning. AI is a very generalized term. So I think that's one thing the hype cycle has done. It's made quite popular. I think there needs to be more distinction.
Sprinkle a little bit on top?
I know, a little AI dust.
Some flavor.
And then, a really big one, which maybe we'll get into, but who's directing the narrative of this AI hype? All you have to do is look at the tech bros over in California. No offense. It's no.
This isn't California over here.
Hey, some of us may have derived from California to my left. It's generally Western white males. And that is really problematic when you look at the rest of the world who are not Western and white. So I think more of this needs to be talked about when we look at deploying these really powerful technologies.
For sure. You're getting into some of my world topics, but no, you're good. Kirsten, Kyle, anything you'd want to add about how you're seeing any of this manifest today?
Actually, both points of view really resonate with me. When I think about the general population, I think when they see AI or hear AI, they actually think of artificial general intelligence. They think there is an intelligent being in the computer, and the ethics around that is frightening. It's really frightening. And so I'm glad there are people like Carrie that are going and really thinking deeply about that, preparing us all for that. It kind of reminds me in some ways when I joined Google, right, we were going to organize the world's information. And I was straight out of graduate school, kind of naive, super excited about that opportunity. And, I think fast forward 16 years and we see ads, we see social networks, and we see all these different things that Google distributed system technology did to our society. And so I do think it's incredibly important that people really, this time around, think about what that's going to mean in 16 years. The other thing that I want to call out that I don't think has really been highlighted yet is I think a lot of people in the markets, they effectively, especially today, they see a beginning of a new economic cycle, right? And they want to invest in the future. And AI is the thing that's right in front of them. There are these, great anecdotal, use cases like doctors, and they play with ChatGPT, and they've drafted emails, right? And so I think a lot of people are really grasping on to AI as that thing that will drive that economic cycle. And I think that's both good and bad, right? And it doesn't mean that the market opportunities are only limited to AI, but that openness, that willingness for enterprises and other people to begin playing with technology again, begin thinking about retooling their enterprise software, that's a super exciting feeling that I get when I look at the broader market.
I think the only other thing I'll add is, pulling on this thread where everything really takes longer than you think it will. And I think when, the world awoke to what was going on at OpenAI, certainly on the venture side, especially in Silicon Valley, it felt like there was like a 3-month rush where like everybody had to have a wrapper around some kind of OpenAI technology. It's usually utilizing OpenAI, and there was a lot of fear, I think, at that point that if you didn't start investing in that right away, you were going to miss, getting into some of these companies early. I think for folks that were tracking it for a really long time, like Kyle mentioned, this is not, a switch that was flipped. This technology has been evolving over time and over a very long period of time, and will continue to evolve over very long periods of time. And like we heard as well on the use case side, to actually take a technology and then bring it into a market and solve a customer pain point to an extent where it's acceptable to them and they actually find ROI, that takes also a long time, right? And so the hype is really the knowledge that this technology exists, and the awakening to what it can do. And yes, there were obviously some big, improvements in what it could do. But we're still going to be here up on stage for a decade talking about this.
Yeah, and that's I want to transition a little bit, but building on that, right? So we've mostly been talking about where are we today, September 2024. I did send around to all the panelists. I bet people here have seen it, but when OpenAI released the O1 model last week, they did this awesome marketing piece where they had a woman who's a geneticist talk about, she does research on one of one genetic disorders, diseases, and she doesn't have anybody to collaborate with and help her make sense of what's happening. It felt like a light bulb for me. I'm kind of curious what the rest of you all thought, but we've gone from this moment. Oh, I can be louder. Whoa, I didn't realize there's another gear. Is this better? Were we too quiet? Okay. Let's all stick the mics way up in our faces. Cool. Thanks for the feedback. Let us know if we're being too quiet. But yeah, it was a real world benefit to something that I think has felt like the thing that writes poetry for your birthday party to a lot of people, right? And then, we're like, cool, it does reasoning. And I think people in the normal world hear like, oh, it writes code, great. I don't do that. This was a deep, hard problem being solved with a AI. I'd love to hear just kind of reflections in terms of, what does that mean for the next step in consumer value, the next step in business value? I'm also aware that, this is probably the reason that Andrej Karpathy challenged the board a year ago, was seeing a model like this. It's been almost a year that it's out, right? So we think about like the step level changes that are happening. As you all think about like that topic and building on it, the future of kind of what's around the corner for people, what do you think's coming? What's the interesting stuff that's got your attention or that you're either hopeful for or maybe nervous about in the world?
off. So if I take a step back and kind of break down the industry, you have large language models, right, which we're all hearing about. Then you have infrastructure companies that help software developers and companies utilize these large language models in real-world applications. Then you have application level use, right? So that would be like the vertical specific application that we talked about with, helping a doctor be more effective at their role. And I like to break that category down into two. One is the kind of co-pilot category, which is, this is a technology that sits alongside a human and helps that human get better leverage on their time. So the doctor example is a great one. The strawberry, those are all great examples of that. And that's really exciting because that feels a little bit safer, I think, to folks where, all right, you still have a human in the loop and you're able to get better leverage on your time. And maybe it even brings out data or ideas that you might not have seen. There's definitely ethical implications of that. And that's been, I think, the current moment that I'm seeing a lot of co-pilots. And then I think there's problems that are actually AI and done. And to me, that's where this gets really kind of interesting and exciting, which is what are the problems that humans were maybe not that great at solving? And by being able to utilize compute and a much broader set of data, we can actually solve these problems much better than we historically have been able to with AI. So one of the examples to kind of highlight that would be, so I have a company that's working with pharma companies. It's called Empathic. They work with pharma companies that are working on mental health applications. So they're looking to could they utilize this AI and deep learning technology to be better than humans at collecting data from patients going through trials, right? Where they can have less bias in what they're collecting. They can make sure the protocol is being followed, and it can, for example, on the mental health side, find things like examples of suicidal ideation or other side effects that the technology is actually better equipped to find because it's not coming in with any bias than the human doctors are. And so that is where, for me, I get kind of more excited about where it could go.
Can I be the contrarian?
Yeah.
So I don't think much is going to come out of it for the next few years. The main reason why is in data science, machine learning, we historically would say, 90% of machine learning is just dealing with data management, data curation, and 10% is building ML AI models. What I see, like day to day, is that yes, the models have been much easier for you to prompt, to do kind of feature engineering types of things and get more interesting responses out of it. But I have not seen a whole lot of improvement on the other 90%. And this is going to sound like a pitch for free play, right? Because it's exactly what the problem that free plays is. But until today, I feel like we are really, really struggling to say, okay, on this specific enterprise problem, for example, this model performs better than the other one, right? It's very, very subjective. And then now when you get into reasoning, it becomes even more complicated. I had lunch with a colleague last week and we were joking around like, okay, so how do we evaluate someone's reasoning? Are we going to do performance reviews? And we're like, no, that's not the technology that we want. Like if we have to do performance review for technology, it's like, it's not super palatable.
It's a very Google place to go with that topic. Some managers there are pumped about that.
I'll add on a bit. I'm actually excited about the regulation. I think that there has been, Colorado actually is a leader. Colorado has one of the most comprehensive AI acts out of any state that was just passed. So I think this state has a lot to be proud of. And in this regulation, what we're really seeing is lots of focus. Traditionally in the US, the focus of public value, sorry to plug my research, but the public value has been on how can government deliver public value through efficiency and effectiveness. That is kind of the US stance on public value. Now with this interjection of AI, there's a lot more in the regulation about security, about operational integrity, and about safety. So if you look at the Colorado AI Act and the US AI Research and Development 2023 Updated Act, on balance, actually, security and safety and operational integrity are really well represented. So I'm really excited actually to see regulation finally kind of catching up. I know that's kind of a boring comment, but that does excite me. And actually, I want to build on what Kirsten said. I think the mental health chatbots, especially for the developing world, are huge. There have been a couple that have been deployed. They've had some ethical issues, mainly around consent. But there was one that just got approval in the UK, I think last week. It's reached the highest standards that a mental health chat bot can get. And effectively, in the developed world, these countries and a lot of these people don't have the resources to seek psychologists, to talk to anyone about what they're going through. And even though there are some ethical implications, to have something like an AI chatbot for mental health issues in the developing world is amazing. So I think we're going to see some really incredible things, even out of just this new version. I do see Steve's point. I mean, what's the difference between 4.0 and Strawberry? Yes. Do I think that we should have general artificial intelligence? No. I hope that we have really narrow but very deep AI. I think AGI is actually quite dangerous. I know that's provocative.
This before the panel, by the way, which we won't need to get into.
Who won?
For the sake of this. She's
Obviously, I did.
What? She's the ethicist. Like, there's no way I'm going to compete with that.
It's a great trump card.
So I think I can kind of close us on this one. We all talk about LLMs right now. That's what we've been talking about on stage, but like no one's talking about SLMs or agents. What we see happening right now broadly is that tool-based agents are going to be kind of the next wave of excitement and things that are happening right now, where LLMs, the general purpose ones, the open source Llama 3.1, GPT 4.0, Anthropic Claude 3.5, Sonnet, all of these are capable now of understanding user intent, and now with Strawberry there's even greater understanding and reasoning on user intent. They also have a syntax through which they can recognize new tools that they can, or new functions that they can go and activate. So one might be, hey, go and tell me about what my calendar looks like today and how I might optimize my time. Well, to do that, the LLM has to recognize the intent is for me to get access to my calendar, and then it has to activate some sort of thing, some function that can go and get that data, use that to augment that prompt, and then send that through, and then the LLM can interpret based on having access to both my intent and that data source what I'm looking for. Well, it gets really cool if I can say, hey, tell me how to optimize my calendar, my time, and then help me prepare for every meeting that I have. Well, what needs to be true? Well, there's a bunch of different tools and functions that can go and grab well, if there's somebody's email address on here, what's the email history I have with them? Well, that's another tool to go grab that email history. So I see a lot of what is potential and available now is for all of these different, and I don't want to call these agents because I don't think that's the best way to state them, but these functions, these tools that can be invoked by an LLM with a particularly common syntax that they're all capable of recognizing, that they start to work together. That it's not just, I have to prompt and get my calendar to come in, and I have to prompt and get, or give it some more information or data about a meeting to help me organize and prep for that thing. I know that you mentioned co-pilots are like, yeah, you see a lot of those. We're not even even nearly penetrated in a way that's like valuable to end users on co-pilots, because people don't know how to use this for the most part. I know this because when we get into like training a 40,000 person organization versus training a 150 person organization, we talk to the people who are not the smart people that are in this room right now. I don't mean smart, they're intelligent in a different way. They just don't have the same degree of exposure that people do to the technology we do.
Technology people.
And so we are getting there. And it's like, I love the idea of getting out way in front of this stuff, but I think people have to, I will always take this like realism view of what we see. Because all mine's empirical. I can tell you, I talked to a person yesterday who's like, hey, my mind was blown because I wrote a poem for my nephew. And like it incorporated the location of our local church into it. Like, that's so cool. I go, wow, okay. Like, we're still there, and I'm talking about this next wave of tech that's gonna kind of rock everyone's world is when these agents start to do things and then start to work together. And we're probably at like 3 to 5 years in that realm alone before that's like widely adopted and people are leveraging that and everything. So But you asked what's next. And
Or where
I
the
think that's
opportunity-
kind of what's coming
Yeah.
right now is this common syntax through which people can start to build these tools that go and do things. And that's called tool retrieval augmented generation, or tool RAG. For anybody in here, go and ask ChatGPT to go and break it down for you really simply. It's really fun.
I think it's interesting what you just said, because you basically, Kyle's a pessimist. He likes to dog on this technology.
Contrarian's not pessimism. It's actually optimism. I'll get to that in a little bit.
I asked Kyle when he first got to work with an LLM, and he like basically started with, when was the paper written? Like, you know, it goes back to 2017. He's got experience here, and so I think he's been sitting with the tech longer than a lot of us, which I appreciate. I also think, like, to what Steven just said, you actually didn't say anything new about the underlying AI, right? This is like a lot of applied use, right? So this like tool calling, we're still using, you know, OpenAI or Claude or Llama or whatever else under the hood. We're just stitching it together, right? So I think there's this interesting thing happening where, you know, how does Grin and team at Empathic build this? They're stitching models together in an applied way. You want to get them in the developing world. Like, one of the most exciting, I think, investment opportunities here is delivering this tech through SMS, right? Like this, suddenly you have access to this brilliant computer through a very simple interface, right? So everyone just talked about these things where we're kind of dancing around the state of what's possible. Maybe the fundamental models don't need to change a whole lot, but we are also still at the very beginning of like real applied use. You know, a year ago, people were not talking about agents, and if you did talk about them, most people in business freaked out because it was like, whoa, you're just going to amplify all the, you know, non-deterministic parts of LLMs. So I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of this conversation. This is like your Rorschach test.
It wasn't actually intended to like walk around the questions, because I think there's a whole holistically different topic when it comes to the incremental change or in between models that we can perceive versus what people who are doing all of the testing on these models are telling you. Oh, this model is that much better than that, but the incremental perception of that change is actually quite small. But they will tell you this is a dramatic, you know, exponential leap in capability. Now, when we get into saying, like I read a paper on this not too long ago, maybe 5 or 6 months ago, that was talking about the data requirements and the energy and compute requirements to go from GPT-3 to GPT-4o, and how substantial that was, and how to go from GPT-4 to 4o to 5 is exponentially more than that. And then if we're thinking beyond that to whatever models turn into next, the number that I read was that just on the power grid alone, the burden is going to increase 2 to 4x. Stop. Full stop. That is a problem. Like that's not something that's easily conquered. It's not like we can just throw a couple more chips in the basket and it's going to work better. These are power plants that need to be built in order to engage and continue to develop. Sam Altman would tell you, like, unless we see fusion, we're never going to see Gen AI or AGI. Now, you're just mentioning a really interesting question, and Carrie and I were having a really great discussion about this before, which was that, like, she said, I don't even think AGI is necessary. Do you even think GPT-5 is necessary? And what is the cost on from an ethics perspective on humanity? Like we gotta go build power plants. Like, I know solar and wind, it's unlimited, but it's not easily scaled right now. And I'm a big fan of it, by the way. Don't hear me say I'm not. But coal is easily scalable, but no one wants more coal plants here. So what does that mean for us as we start to think about, hey, what's beyond, what's next, and what value are we really achieving? And what we're talking about right now for the next 5 years at least is getting value what we've got today. Sorry to rephrase your question.
So I want to again play the contrarian. What Kristen said earlier really resonated with me. Like, what I see is just the evolution of technology. And my background is in computer architecture, and so I've seen exponential growth, right? Gordon Moore's law, right, for many decades, and see how technology can grow so quickly when there's demand. When the transformers came out, it was a step function. It replaced all of our models. We were using recurrent neural networks, and overnight, we replaced them with transformers. When ChatGPT came out, we didn't swap out our internal tech, right? What I see in ChatGPT, the major breakthrough, is that they really solved a human-computer interaction problem, right? They took the core technology, they used reinforcement learning, human feedback, to run it through ordinary human beings and make it feel more like ordinary human beings. And then as soon as they had that breakthrough, it made the technology accessible to a much, much larger audience than it was previously, and that's kind of where we are, what we've been chasing since.
And from an investor perspective, that I think these large language models might be the fastest depreciating asset we've ever seen historically. Right? When you think about it, like, do we really need, 5? Like, we spent, how many hundreds of millions, billions of dollars building 4? What's the utility we're going to get out of the incremental improvement now in 5 compared to the cost that's going to go into that? And how does the value come out?
And it's not just financial costs, right? It's planetary costs. Just to build on what Steve was saying earlier, I mean, if AI is to live up to the hype that we think it is, if our refrigerator is going to tell us that, we need milk and eggs and our cheese expires in 2 days, there aren't enough resources on Earth to meet that kind of planetary demand. So I think that's something to really consider. We obviously need a big energy revolution for that to happen. But it is, at the moment, we actually cannot reach the, what AI is promised because there's just too much planetary demand. There was an article just released actually in the Guardian last week, and it said, lots of these AI companies say, oh, we green energy, don't worry, most of our stuff, it comes from solar power, et cetera. They're just buying carbon credits. So that's great. I think that's really great. But it obfuscates actually the carbon footprint. So I think we all just owe it to ourselves to look a little deeper on the green footprint of some of these data centers and the infrastructure. It is ethereally called the cloud for a reason. It seems like it is weightless, but it is very real hard infrastructure. There are wires, there are pipes, there are mines, there are people in the developing world, broken record, that are mining a lot of these rare earth minerals. It is environmentally really destructive. So I think it needs to be more obvious, the environmental impact that some of these technologies have today.
I feel like we've made our way into the conversation about the tech piece from the life piece. We're already there. But there's interesting tension here, right? About what's possible. I want to ask Kirsten, here we are, Startup Week. How many people in the room are self-identified startup people, founders or employees building startups? Yeah, okay, cool. It's actually surprising that it's less than half of you, but that's still great. When you think about all the tension here and you think about the landscape, I'd love to hear from everybody on this, not just Kirsten, but what do you see as overinvested? What's underinvested? What are you excited about? I think there's 500 Chat Your Docs apps. There's 500 developer tools. We build one of them. What do you think about the landscape today?
This is a really hard thing to be able to predict and to know. And I think it's a hard time to be on the venture side because what we were talking about earlier is how do we get value out of this in a 3 to 5 year time period, which I fully agree, still a lot to be done. From a venture standpoint, we think on a 5 to 10 year timeline. So when we think about the problems that exist today that these agents or co-pilots can help us solve, those are very real problems and they should be solved. The problem from the investor standpoint is that there's maybe less of a moat, or it's not clear that those problems will endure with how the technology advances. And so can you build a big business that endures on a problem, sort of a functional level vertical problem that some of these companies are going after today? I think that is one of the hardest parts of our job today, is trying to figure out, of the, tons of, AI companies that, maybe it's a sprinkle of AI or maybe it's, a much more technical team. Who's solving a problem that is going to be an enduring problem that can build a big business and actually create a competitive advantage where they're protected for long enough to win enough of the market to, produce the outsized returns that we're looking for in venture. So I don't have a great answer to that, but that's how we think about it.
I'm going to use this opportunity to be the optimist, contrarian optimist. So I think when I joined Google, it was clear that the stars were aligning for Google. Google came out of the dot-com bust. It was a period where big companies overbuilt fiber optic networks, built tons of data center infrastructure, power. They built all of this stuff because people knew the internet was valuable, right? It's obvious, right? But that first wave of companies couldn't figure it out. And when Google came about, they looked around and like, oh, wow, we can buy dark fiber 10 cents on the dollar. There's all this empty data center space. Personal computers have been on a tear for the last 20 years, so there's this cheap computing capability right there. At the same time, networking was coming to fruition. High-performance data center networking was starting to shape up. And they cracked a huge problem, distributed systems, right? And based on distributed systems, they built search, something that Yahoo couldn't do because they were using these big mainframe like Sun Microsystem machines. They built a bunch of cool products, and they missed huge opportunities. They missed social. They missed Amazon, retail, right? And public cloud, right? It all came from that period of time shortly after the dot-com bust, where all of this, infrastructure and tech was available. And so this is why I like playing the contrarian, because if I can look behind, past the peak of inflated expectations or whatever it is, right? Yeah. And beyond the trough of disillusionment, right? Like I see an amazing future for new businesses, new companies to emerge after this whole hype cycle plays itself out.
And this is happening again, right? So like the dark fiber comment that you made, Kyle mentioned this to me, he called it out, right? Sundar recently talked about like, hey, we're potentially over-investing in the data center. I don't have the quote memorized, right? In the build out for all this GPU infrastructure, what happens with it all, right? And I think that was an interesting question. Mark Zuckerberg made similar comments. I planted the seed with some folks. What good things would you hope people would go build or would come out of unlimited compute if there were just a bunch of GPUs that needed to be utilized, setting aside the cost to power them?
Can I just jump in on,
I think this is, sorry, I'll let Kyle add more context if he wants to on that, like the way that I framed that, because I think you might have a little bit more.
The risk of over-investing is much less than the risk of under-investing. That's the big tech perspective. And I think if you've been in tech for the last 4 or 5 years, I think you're going to bet on over-investing. Similar to, when the government was pumping capital into the markets and people were at home in the pajamas clicking on ads, right? Big tech over-invested. A year later, they're cutting costs, laying off, right? And so I see a cycle there.
Yeah, I just want to tap on something Kristen said because I want to maybe take a little contrarian point. I'm not a VC, so that's kind of a weird position to take. But I think there's a lot of people that raise their hands in the room that are building something here. There are durable problems to solve today. And I want to make sure that people don't feel discouraged when you're out building something that venture is only looking on 5 to 10 year horizons, and believing that problems that are not durable, or believing that those durability has to last beyond that, because I look at the cloud, the way cloud developed, and where it came from, and I'm former AWS here. I got to tell you, there are still a lot of enterprise customers going through digital transformation right now, right? They're moving workloads to the cloud, and to everyone in this room who's got familiarity with that is absurd to think that they're still even considering running their own data centers, because the cost efficacy has been known and quantified over and over and over and over again. So we are at the very beginning of this wave, and there is a lot of work and durable problems to solve that might not have as much durability in 10 years or 8 years, but there's still going to be a lot of people that are lagging into this space right now. And don't get caught up in the bubble of thinking, oh shit, I'm way behind. Excuse my language, sorry about that. I'm way behind because I'm not solving something 8 years out, and I'm not creating GPT-6 in my head, and I'm building something on top of. You should be encouraged. There are a lot of problems that people are facing, and there will be a lot of laggards. The vast majority of the market, in fact, will be laggards on adopting this tech, and there's a lot of work to do around it. So, anyways, I'm not saying you were being discouraging, by the way. I just wanted to make sure that people felt like there's still a lot of work to do here.
I just got the cue that we have about 4 minutes left. I was the naive moderator that thought we had until the top of the hour. So we're going to accelerate. And I'm looking at you, but I mean, I think we're getting to hear a lot of tech conversation. Kyle and Steven, I think, just both gave relative bull cases for just build something awesome, the world will change. I'm in the bull camp too, to be clear. Like, we're helping people do this applied AI stuff, and it seems magical. Carrie, I don't want to position you as a pessimist, but I think we need more voices in these conversations. I worked at Twitter for 7 years. The person who had my job before me made the movie The Social Dilemma, and that was interesting, right? Because I think we all kind of realized, hey, we were heads down. It was actually a Jesuit priest who said to me, like, you guys screwed this up. You weren't thinking about anything other than the next quarter. And you were doing something that had a huge impact on the world, but you just weren't incentivized to think differently. You were only thinking about hitting your goals. Fine, that's how the business works. Like, what's your take for this room, for the people like us that are building in this space? What are the things we should be thinking about in terms of, creating something that's good for the world a decade and 50 years from now?
No pressure. No pressure. Well, first of all, I like that you use the word incentive. I think that it's a really good practice just to look at who you're talking to or the product you're using or investing in and ask, what's the incentive here? Just to go kind of off script and a little diagonal. I mean, you question why a lot of these tech bros are in the room with regulation or saying, hey, we need a pause or more regulation, what have you. And it's because they want to be in the room to dictate the conversation. And you have to realize what their motivation is and what the intent is behind it. These technologies are not neutral. They reflect the very biases of the companies that deploy them. So we need to use them like they are a political artifact, because they are. I would really encourage everyone when they say, AI is neutral or, what have you. It's kind of like the same argument that, ooh, this might get shady, that like guns don't kill people, people kill people. Like, it is, AI is not neutral. It is in itself a biased technology. So I think that's where I'll start. I did want to touch on your initial question, Ian, which was, what if compute got to zero? And I also just I don't want to come off as a pessimist. Guys, I am like an eternal optimist here.
Give us the optimist
I am an eternal optimist. But I think that, safe and pragmatic is kind of where my optimism really shines. I think if we had zero compute, it would be incredible. I mean, imagine the gains for society. Imagine the gains for the global south and for the developing world. It'd be incredible. You would have personalized medicine. You'd have personalized education. And genomics would be advanced. Aging might be solved. We can talk about if we should live forever in a different debate. But that would be incredible. I mean, the advances in humanity would be amazing. Now, some of the downfalls. I mean, what is the cost? We're not just talking about financial cost here. It's planetary costs as well. The one thing I haven't really heard in the panel today, but it's because I'm the ethicist and I haven't really mentioned it, job loss. There is a real risk of job loss. And all of us in this room think, okay, we're talking about artificial intelligence, so it's going to be the intelligent jobs. That is not what history tells us. History tells us that it's the people that are already marginalized who are going to really feel the impact of AI. So I think we need to keep that in mind as we start to look at who to compensate. We need to compensate the losers, if you will. But it is, there are lots of things to consider. I don't want to go down this negative contrarian path because I am an eternal optimist, but happy to expand.
The optimistic perspective, though, is that in machine learning, bias is on the forefront of any machine learning engineer's thought process, right? Identifying the bias, measuring the bias, right? And I actually think there is an opportunity for us to replace a lot of bias processes today, with this, with technology that's well understood and well measured.
Also, I mean, humans are biased, so we can't erase all bias. It's the benchmark should be, is it better than a human? I mean, that should be the very like littlest benchmark. But I think it's really good to erase human bias. And in some ways, like machines and algorithms and machine learning do a lot better job than humans.
That could be its own 45-minute conversation. Well, I hope the conversation has been interesting. We are going to need to wrap up. We're out of time. I'm sure people on the panel are sticking around for a bit if you want to talk to them at the back of the room or something. Yeah, I mean, thank you all for the conversation. I think it's just like we're processing this all together in real time. Our friend Mike Conover, who was going to be here, was not able to be here. We're so glad Steven's here. But he and I had a chat this week. He was like, look, I've been working on LMs for a while. Reality is that like the whole industry is learning at basically the same rate right now because it wasn't until 2 years ago that real applied use began. And I think collectively, including civil society and academia, all of us are figuring out like, what do we do with it? And I'm just glad we're having the conversations, even if there's different perspectives. So thank you all for the time. Thank you for listening, coming to the event. Have a great afternoon.